I think that sometimes in the earliest days of a technology, when you see that a lot of things are going to become possible, there's a tendency to think, all right, we're immediately going to jump to step 100. Like exactly what I predict this exponentially growing technology will be capable of, we're going to hop directly there. But things don't always actually work that way. For example, AI can fly planes, AI flies drones, does a pretty good job of it. But if you go and you grab a bunch of people in line for their United flight and you say, hey, today there's no pilot, like you're being flown by a bunch of NVIDIA chips, everyone's going to say, whoa, that is not what I signed up for at all. And there's probably all sorts of other contextual clues that'll start to crop up. For example, what sort of hotel do I recommend to somebody who's traveling on a Friday if their spelling is really bad or if their spelling is really good? Like somebody with really bad spelling traveling to Las Vegas on a Friday, maybe they're just going to go have fun. But if they've got like really perfect diction when they are running their search and they're going to Las Vegas on a Friday, that sounds more like you're showing up to the big healthcare conference to me. And so there's a lot of different degrees to which I think that these LLMs will have much more data.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Future Proof. Today, I sit down with Kevin Wang, who is the Chief Product Officer at Braze. He started there 14 years ago as one of their first engineers. Braze is building a customer engagement platform that allows marketing teams to really take advantage of AI to create very personalized segments and build campaigns. And obviously, a big part of that is actually keeping humans in the loop as a part of that process. So we talk about what it means to leave human feedback and maintain human control when they're using that AI decisioning part of their product. And we also talk about some surprising examples that they've seen as they continue to roll out this AI product to different enterprise customers and really challenge what is possible thanks to prompting and how quick the iteration cycle can be with prompting. So stay tuned. There's a lot to learn from Kevin and excited to hear what you think. Hey everyone, welcome back to Future Proof. Excited to share that today I'm here with Kevin Wang. He is the Chief Product Officer at Braze. Kevin, welcome to the podcast.
Great to join. So thanks so much for having me, Ethan.
Awesome. Well, at the time of recording, there's been a lot of rumors, a lot of potential just rumblings about how ads may be coming to ChatGPT. Maybe by the time this actually airs that it'll already be released. But I think this has prompted a lot of people to ask about how the kind of search-driven ad landscape that we see today will change and evolve as AI systems increasingly become a part of people's buying process and like way of identifying information and new products. So I'm curious from your point of view, like, you know, deep in personalization for marketing teams, like how is this landscape going to evolve and what kind of shifts should we expect?
Yeah, so I think it's very interesting to think about what sorts of marketing activities are going to move onto these platforms, particularly on the ad and let's call it like more broadly, the acquisition marketing side, because this is really the next big surface that's opened up in a very broad way since I guess really sort of the Facebook or the social media ecosystems. There's obviously been new ad networks built out by shopping platforms like Amazon and Instacart are essentially running large ad platforms. Of course, you know, Instacart's former CEO is now at OpenAI, so there's obviously a lot of combination there. But this is kind of like the next big surface area that we're seeing really crop up. I think that what's going to be really interesting on the personalization front is that obviously a Facebook, a Google, they're already tracking different aspects of people and, you know, creating personas and creating profiles around them. But what will be really interesting is that the depth of data that can really feed into these LLMs and that can be fed for personalization, that's one dimension where we're going to be able to go much, much deeper on the LLM foundational model side. And on the other side, there's also this degree of course, interactivity and automation that's going to happen. And that's where there's really no paradigm. Like if you're getting into, say, some of these new agentic shopping experiences, if you're getting into some sort of like agentic flight booking experience or something like that, that's where the rabbit hole is going to go really deep. And it's also going to go really deep in different ways, depending on the vertical that we're talking about. Like buying a new pair of shoes, booking a flight, I don't know, doing your taxes or something like that. There's many, many different ways that this can actually manifest. And so I think that on the personalization front, the experiences will get much, much more personalized, but I would expect us to actually see almost more vertical specific ecosystems cropping up around the different ways that people want to interact with these different sorts of experiences that'll be built on the foundational models.
Yeah, absolutely. And just thinking about like how the kinds of data that say like a Facebook or Google collect today, like they're very coarse-grained sort of categories about like what you might be searching for. I feel like with the agent experience, there's so much more depth about like even what a user might be asking for hidden inside of the question. Like maybe it's not directly like I'm shopping for shoes, but like maybe it's actually there are other health concerns that that the agent actually knows about because they're in context with that user in so many other dimensions of their life. So it's almost like the agent would be able to know some things that the person hasn't even asked yet.
Yep, I think that's definitely true, and there's probably all sorts of other contextual clues that'll start to crop up. For example, what sort of hotel do I recommend to somebody who's traveling on a Friday if their spelling is really bad or if their spelling is really good? Like somebody with really bad spelling traveling to Las Vegas on a Friday, maybe they're just going to go have fun. But if they've got like really perfect diction when they are running their search and they're going to Las Vegas on a Friday, that sounds more like, you're showing up to the big healthcare conference to me. And so there's a lot of different degrees to which I think that these LLMs will have much more data. And then also, of course, with these transformer models and their ability to see all sorts of different patterns and correlations that were very hard to uncover before, it will also be interesting to see kind of just like what is the depth to which they can actually tease out real durable patterns. And the way I think about it is more like music preferences rather than say, like ice cream flavor preferences. Ice cream flavor preferences are kind of coarse grained, but if you talk to someone about their music preferences, we start to realize that everyone's got like completely different preferences. And it's very, very hard to bucket anyone into an individual category. I think we're going to see that additional layer of depth come into the personalization around these foundational models.
Yeah, I like that kind of comparison to like, your music taste versus just ice cream flavors. And I think it's interesting to kind of think about how like AI agents in some ways will become researchers for buyers in some sense. I think we're already seeing some of that. A lot of people actually discover Paragon now through ChatGPT, which is a channel that I think a lot of people are seeing more of now.
Yep.
And I think a few months ago, the Perplexity CEO, he had mentioned that like the way he envisions advertising is essentially two agents instead of humans. Like that, like that kind of messaging will actually happen invisibly, like in the background to agents that are personalized to us. I'm curious, like, to get your general take on that. Like, is that a shift that you expect to see? Like, what could that actually look like in practice? And is that top of mind for people? Like, kind of optimizing for like chatbot or like LLM reading and research over even human research at this point?
Well, we're really early into the overall AI wave. And so I think whenever we see a platform shift, so Braze, for example, where I'm running product, in the very early days, we were sort of at the start of the mobile revolution. It was just really, really hard in many ways to predict all of the different kind of technology societal changes that would happen, because it's not just that the technology evolves, it's really that the culture that we're operating in evolves with the technology. And that confluence of different factors makes it very hard to predict. And it's of course, we're at like, one strike into the first inning of this with AI. So some of the things that I would think about there are, one, that there's always going to be a question of what do people actually want to cede to like the machines in terms of what they do versus what do they want to keep very personal. And I think that sometimes in the earliest days of technology, when you see that a lot of things are going to become possible, there's a tendency to think, all right, we're immediately going to jump to step 100, like exactly what I predict this exponentially growing technology will be capable of. We're going to hop directly there. But things don't always actually work that way. Like, for example, AI can fly planes. AI flies drones, does a pretty good job of it. But if you go and you grab a bunch of people in line for their United flight and you say, hey, today there's no pilot, like you're being flown by a bunch of NVIDIA chips, everyone's going to say like, whoa, that is not what I signed up for at all. And so I think there's a big question about that, especially for something like shopping and making more personal decisions, because there's the aspect of control, but in some cases people also like find it fun. Like, I don't know about you, I like shopping. And so it's like, I want to do some shopping on my own. So there will be a societal question around where everyone falls, and there's usually also a generational question where newer generations are faster adopters of new technology. But then I think that assuming that we go into that world, and I think for some tasks we will want to go more into this world, like for like a really rote task, like how do I pay my taxes, or how do I fill out my vacation calendar or something like that. I do think more and more of that will be agentic, will be automated. I think what will be really interesting to see will be what are the different guardrails around where data lies and sort of who owns the context that's going to drive the decision making. So, for example, if I'm somebody who does a lot of online shopping, do I want ChatGPT to own all of that? Do I want Gemini or Anthropic to own all of that? Do I want to own it myself? Is this something where I actually want the brands to have that information? Because in a lot of cases right now, everything's getting mediated by the foundational models because they're the ones that are kind of our portal, in a web portal sense, into the technology. But if I'm thinking about buying, new Nike shoes or something like that, I'm fine with Nike knowing my preferences, and I know my preferences. And if I had that locally, I'd be fine with that. In a way, ChatGPT is sort of the last entity that I want to have those preferences, because like I don't really care. Like that's the model, they're not the ones who are actually making my shoes. It's not that I would necessarily have a problem with it, but they're not first in line. And so where those lines get drawn will be interesting because all the different players, like a retailer, a foundational model, a consumer, all of them have somewhat different incentives in this market, and we'll have to see where that shakes out.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I love what you said kind of about how we kind of have to wait for the consumer culture and preferences to kind of be expressed and unfold because it is ever changing. I think there's already been some alarmist reactions to like sort of the advertising model inside of ChatGPT to come potentially. So super interesting. And kind of speaking of like maybe on the theme of AI guardrails and privacy protection in general, but from a slightly different perspective, I wanted to talk about, how Braze, in your product, you really enable marketing teams to create this, very targeted, high quality segmentation from your platform. And I'm sure, the AI wave has just infinitely benefited like the ability to scale that. And I'm curious, like, as you've rolled those tools out to marketing teams, like what kind of like thresholds or like guardrails that you have needed to put in place to kind of review like what's happening behind the scenes?
Yeah, so I think that the nature of the guardrails that people want to put into place is very, very contextual. It's very context specific because so I'll give you an example of two different types of products that we offer. So one of them is a number of different agents that can essentially run different sorts of AI mediated rephrasing, reframing, decisioning, data processing directly within the flow of a customer journey. So for example, if I am interacting with a website or with a web app and I'm passing back some sort of information to Braze, and we're triggering notifications and passing all of that event data through our system and making decisions on it, you can actually inject AI throughout that in real time for every single individual user to make different calls. And so, that's a really cool thing. We've recently announced some case studies that were really exciting where folks were, for example, determining whether or not to buy certain products by responding directly and having an LLM understand their responses and then push them down different sorts of branches of a user journey. On the other hand, we also actually recently acquired a reinforcement learning AI decisioning startup called OfferFit that now forms the core of our AI decisioning studio. And what OfferFit does is it allows you to set up a number of really high value use cases throughout all of your overall marketing and customer engagement and all the communication that you're doing with your customers, where what we'll do is we'll actually allow you to define goals, allow you to define guardrails, and then use this really high scale, really powerful reinforcement learning system to find exactly the right hyper-personalized, super well-crafted journey for every single individual in your user base. And on the topic of those thresholds or those guardrails, a huge part of the OfferFit AI Decisioning Studio product is really oriented around collaborating directly with the brands that we work with to say, what are the rules that you care about? Like, do you not want to send notifications on the weekend? Do you not want to send notifications during a certain hour? Do you want to make sure that you're optimizing towards a very specific promotional budget while still maximizing your overall revenue? Do you want to make sure that you're really minimizing people who are turning off notifications, who are unsubscribing, even if it's very profitable to sort of have a little bit of attrition there? What do you really care about? And that's a really cool human-machine collaboration, which I think is the paradigm that we're going to see moving forward and for quite a while into the foreseeable future.
Yeah, yeah, super interesting to kind of hear about that decisioning studio, I think you called it. What does that look like kind of in practice for maybe like more non-technical users, like jumping into like an RL environment? In practice, is it like reviewing responses and just giving thumbs up, thumbs down? Like what does that tuning look like for those teams?
Yeah, so this is actually what's so cool about it is that once we have the system set up, which is really more of just a standard SaaS integration process, you don't need to be that technical to really understand like the deep internals of an RL model in order to make full use of the system. So we have 4 deployed data scientists who work with our customers to make sure that all of these use cases are running really well. And what we're really looking to from them is a deep business understanding. We're looking for them to understand what matters to the business. How do we define success in a quantitative way that these RL models are actually able to use? What do we care about, going back to those thresholds and guardrails in terms of our priorities? And that's what's so neat is that you don't need to, have a PhD, although the founders of OfferFit do have math PhDs, but you don't need to have a PhD in math. You don't need to have taken advanced linear algebra to harness this technology, because what we're able to really do is translate business goals and business guardrails and business needs into something that the machines can really understand and act upon and optimize on an ongoing basis. And that's what the power is, and that's what's so cool.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I think that's maybe the first time on this podcast that we've heard like kind of the user input from non-technical users being like high level goals about a business or like what objectives it's trying to achieve. We see a lot more of I think, or we've heard a lot more of people just human reviewing examples, which I'm sure also happens or plays into it.
Yep, that's also important. And so for the agents that I mentioned at first, the reason that I mentioned that was that what we've also done is, when you're setting up an agent in our dashboard, you can test it. You can see how it would interact with certain types of inputs, the outputs that it would generate. We have the ability to also test and QA all of the different campaigns and canvases, which is our journey building tool, so that there's different ways to check as well. Again, because we're really at this early stage with AI where people aren't yet ceding all control over to AI. People still want to kind of keep an eye on it, which I think will continue for a while, and everything ends up on a spectrum. The really fascinating thing, though, I think on the AI and human in the loop side is that while humans need to check on AI, AI is also really good at checking on humans. That's something that I think sometimes gets missed, that if you're going to go in and QA something, and for example, we have some AI-driven QA features, AI is super good at that because it's just got kind of infinite ability to pay attention to every little detailed nuance. And so the people get tired, the machines don't get tired. And so that's actually a different angle on this whole problem space that we're really leveraging as well.
Yeah, certainly. In the QA loop specifically, I can imagine we've come a long way from just simple spell checking or
right.
Style rules, that sort of thing. I'm curious if there are other aspects where your team has had to really deeply consider safety and oversight. Like what kind of specific areas where you're allowing for AI decisioning, like you need there to be some kind of human in the loop always introduced to this part of the process, and what kind of UI patterns you found really succeed or resonate with your customers?
Well, what I would say is that we were already pre-AI an automation platform. So we were already geared for this. I guess what I would say is we were already geared for a system where computers and programs were making a lot of different decisions or were taking a large amount of automated actions, and humans were also in the loop, both configuring and monitoring the system. And so what we're seeing is just kind of a bit of a sliding over in terms of exactly where humans are. In the past, maybe I run 10 sequential campaigns, and after every campaign, I've been running A/B tests, and I'm settling out on some sort of optimized set of copy overall. Now, rather than having to manually run 10 different analyses over 10 different experiments, now AI can just run the whole thing from sort of start to finish. But the actual role of the human has stayed fairly consistent if you think about it, because the human's the one that had to think of what the overall goals were. The human's the one that had to decide, hey, we're going to use customer engagement to even move that goal in the first place. And the human also is sort of declaring what victory looks like, what victory or defeat looks like, so that the system can learn from it. It's just that now AI can go much, much, much farther in terms of what it's overall capable of. But I do think that as time goes on, what we're going to see is that people will probably want to scale back more and more strategically and look more and more for AI systems to like be creative, to drive different sorts of inspiration, to pick from strategies rather than kind of optimizing micro tactics. And so that'll be an interesting evolution over time as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm curious, like, as you've built out some of these AI features, like maybe when you start testing with larger enterprise customers, is there sort of an easy first project that you tend to feel like fits really well into their own goals, but also sort of like, allows them to wade into the waters of AI, just to validate its success in the context of their business? I think we've heard a lot on this podcast that some enterprise, like you said, we're very early, right? So enterprises can be resistant. What are some of the things that you've used, or like tactics or projects, like first, proofs of concept to kind of counteract that?
Yeah, so I'll mention a few different things that we've done. I will also say that while we're early and enterprises can be afraid, I also think that there's a different, almost in some ways, slightly more confusing thing going on in the market as well, which is that in some cases you'll see enterprises that have sort of a desire to experiment, but they themselves do not actually do that much experimentation as a company. So it's sort of like saying, oh, I want to go skydiving, but I've never even been in an airplane before. And so you're kind of teaching them the whole way through, like, this is what it really looks like to play with a new technology set. So some of the things that have been really exciting for us are, for one, I would say that one thing that we do with our AI decisioning studio is actually we do these essentially like on-site AI academies where we give the history of AI and machine learning. We explain how all these different techniques and tactics work. And then we also run through a number of interactive examples with different teams. So those have been really, really powerful, really exciting. Even if they don't end up using our AI decisioning studio, the folks who do those AI Academy sessions, they find them really, really valuable. And so that's been something that's been really great on kind of just the general building the ecosystem side of things. Another thing that I think has been very helpful on the AI front is that we build out a number of different, essentially kind of, you could call them co-pilots or assistants, although really they're kind of much more automated agents that are directly in our product's dashboard. And so you have a way that you can directly actually go chat with AI. You can get answers in sort of a co-pilot way, but actually increasingly you can also take active action and program and automate more of what you're doing within our Braze dashboard. And what's cool about that is that, first off, the stakes are a little bit lower because you're typing and you're interacting with AI in the context of a marketing and customer engagement strategy, but you aren't literally sending the message quite yet. And so you can kind of, it's a little bit more what you see is what you get to help ease people into that process overall. And at the same time, it's also a platform for us to build more and more and more AI features. And we're already seeing really neat things happen in terms of, shielding support tickets and helping customers to achieve more. So that's really, really powerful as well. And I think that goes to a little bit of a broader point, which is when we think about our agents or when we think of AI decisioning, that's really part of the overall consumer experience. Like what we're delivering to our customers is the ability, if our customer is like Taco Bell, for example, we're giving them the ability to reach out to their consumers and create a better consumer experience. But there's also the whole marketer experience of that person at Taco Bell who needs to use parts of our product. And that's where our in-dashboard operator is really powerful as well. And the overall concept that we really think about is that AI is going to be everywhere. It's a new set of technologies, it's a new set of tools, and as a result, there isn't this concept of like, okay, there's what my business was doing before, and now there's AI that I bolt onto it. It's just there's your business before, it does more because of AI, and that's the really neat evolution that all of us are going through.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think what you said, how you described the in-product operator or that AI that can sort of help you use the Braze dashboard, plays really well with what you mentioned about giving like having the human in the loop already. Like that's just an essential part of being in the dashboard, I'm sure. And it's almost like pair programming is how I think about it. Like you kind of cede control to like the person you're pairing with, and then like maybe you take control back, and like it's kind of a collaborative process of like using a campaign builder or using a journey builder, using the decisioning studio. But like there's basically someone that's like looking over your shoulder and can like take the mouse every once in a while.
Yep, exactly. And what I think so great about it, it's also similar for what it's worth to like a cursor style interface. I mean, I know that's kind of a way people describe this now. And what's great about that is that it really gets the user, our users, into the game of using AI in a very in a very smooth way, with a very smooth on ramp and a smooth learning curve. Because over time, yeah, we expect that today you're saying things like, oh, like, how do I do X in the dashboard? And you're almost using it like a support bot. But in the future, it's going to be something like, hey, remember to fix the strategy on Y. Or even just like, tell me where the strategy looks off and then go and fix it. And then automate more and more and more. And that's the sort of capability that will be possible in the future as these models continue to develop. But we're trying to get as many people as possible onto the on-ramp now so that we can all go off into the future.
Yeah, yeah, and what you said about the AI academies, like the sort of training that you're doing to help enable customers to find those on ramps, I really like what you said about kind of demystifying AI in some sense. Like, there's a lot of curiosity, but maybe not a lot of like deep understanding of like what's actually happening. Like, it's not magic. Like, there's actually there are specific things that you can take advantage of. And I'm curious, like, as you've been running those trainings or enablements, like, what if there are customer examples that have kind of surprised you about like the way that people have been able to leverage it that made it maybe like change your mind about what was possible inside of the product?
Yeah, well, I'll give one surprising example that we saw recently, which was that we were using some of the agents in our product to build out certain types of essentially like user categorization. Like we would take in a bunch of signals, use the LLMs to take those signals and then categorize them for one of the brands that we work with. And what they were finding as they were using these LLMs is that they were essentially asking the LLM to give, I think it was like an affinity score from 1 to 100 or something like that. And the LLM really loved like 4 different numbers. It was clearly trying to put people into a category of like sort of, strong yes, weak no, strong no. But the numbers that it picked were not, 1, 2, 3, 4 or, 0, 25, 70, 50, 75. It picked like 2.3, 15, like 81, and like 85 or something like that. I don't have the exact numbers, right? And it just really shows, I think that, again, these models are not, especially the large language models, they're not deterministic in terms of how they operate or in terms of the types of behaviors that we get out of them. And as a result, to the point of what you were saying about human in the loop, humans really do need to be in the loop in different ways right now, because it's more like kind of riding a mechanical bull right now than it is like, driving your minivan to Whole Foods or something like that. So that was one set of like kind of interesting, counterintuitive or surprising results that we had recently. And also to your point of human in the loop, we've been working with that brand and they're now running further experiments and, in this case, really tweaking prompts, tweaking incoming data a bit so that we can get exactly the type of fine-grained categorization that we really need to drive even further results from there.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I'm kind of curious, like, how they ended up solving for some of those like weird specific magic numbers that keep appearing. Like, I have heard that like maybe for LLMs, just because they're maybe better at generating natural language, that people prefer like qualities, or maybe instead of like a quantitative score assignment from the LLM, that it's better to like choose descriptors or just word-based categories. I'm curious, was that part of the solve, or was it just moving away from a score model entirely?
Well, this is all what's cool is, I mean, this kind of hot off the presses, like the the actual experiments to see how we can continue to evolve this particular agent forward are kind of ongoing right now. So I'll definitely take that idea back to them. I my recollection from looking at how the latest experiments were running were that they were essentially changing the prompt and they were breaking this down into simpler categories and also giving a lot more context. To your point of how the LLMs love natural language, they were giving a lot more language sort of qualitative descriptors around what they were looking for to help it more easily break things into categories, because the model kind of knows how to, like, it knows how to output a score, but I think it's really the just sort of data understanding and conceptual worldview of the concept of scoring something that it needs some help on.
Yeah, yeah, it makes sense. And I think that's actually like, it's both interesting and exciting that like we're kind of at this frontier where people like we are just trying things. Like we are iterating on prompts, and we actually don't know like what performs better or worse, and a lot of it has to be experimental. I think that's actually pretty exciting for marketing teams. It must be using your product.
I think it's so exciting. And if we look at the prior major platform shift generations that we've had recently, like in the last 25 years, a lot of them didn't have the same degree of experimentation. Like if you look at mobile, there was ultimately experimentation and ultimately a lot of transformation of business models and consumer experiences. But, building a mobile app is still kind of hard. Like it's still, being an Android or iOS engineer, for example, this is still one of the most highly in-demand skill sets that exists in the economy, because it's just hard to do. And when something's hard to do, it's really hard to experiment. Like if you contrast building an Android, iOS, two platform app to using Lovable, it's not even comparable, right? It's like the difference between picking up a fork and flying the space shuttle. Like they're not even in the same universe. And before that we had cloud, and cloud is something, it was important as a way to kind of change the economy, but people weren't sitting around being like, oh man, like I'd love to experiment with my cloud CDN. It's like, I don't know who would do that. Like you'd have to be, you need better hobbies, right? And so AI is not like that. Like AI is cool, AI is dynamic, and it's so fast that I think the experimentation cycles on this, like you're saying, it's just really mind blowing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and kind of like tying this all together, as a last question, as people, continue, like we said at the beginning, use LLMs to research, and there's almost like this kind of indirection or like distance happening between like brands and customers in some cases. We're at least seeing that like on the software purchasing side, right? But I'm sure like that could be a leading indicator of like what might be happening. And then simultaneously, like, in the environment, like third-party cookies, like there's a lot of like pressure to crack down on some of those things. Mm-hmm. Like, do you think, how are you like sort of communicating to marketing teams, like how they might need to rethink customer engagement, or like how it will evolve with the broader ecosystem sort of shifting and like kind of the foundations are maybe changing, where they like maybe see less data or maybe more data in just other areas, but like control less of that direct experience in some cases?
Well, it's interesting that you describe things that way, because the way that we view it actually is that we think there's an opportunity for marketers to actually control more of the direct experience overall. Because we think that what AI is really enabling is much more personalization, much more sort of fine-grained communication and experiences, both in product and outside of products, directly with a customer. Because in the past, you had a small, nimble marketing team that really was charged with communicating with an entire customer base and universe of potential customers. And now you can have all these different agents that are going to give more and more strategic leverage to that marketer, which enables them to do much more, which enables them to create that better experience, which enables them to be more one-to-one, even ignoring the broader platform shift of the fact that with these LLMs, you're also getting a new set of kind of platforms to also communicate on. And so what we view our task as, and what kind of our charge to marketers is saying, what you've really got to do is you've got to make sure that you've set up all the different ways that you can communicate with your customers effectively. And then you need to make sure that you are using AI to really give yourself that strategic leverage and really use the leverage to do more in a smarter way, in a more effective way. And that's why we've invested so much in AI decisioning for that type of really, really fine-grained personalization. And I think that's what's really exciting. And if we look back also at other technology shifts, whether it was the internet, whether it was mobile, whether it was cloud, whether it's the printing press, even, like any of these major technology changes, marketing and more generally that sort of experience between brands and consumers, it always takes a big step up because as long as people are using a technology, that's going to kind of evolve the state of the art. And as the state of the art evolves, people are going to use the new modalities. And so we think it's really, really exciting. And that the platform shift that's going on is really just opening up new doors and opening up new possibilities. And it's more about teams being nimble enough to seize that opportunity. That's really the kind of the quest of the moment.
Yeah, that's a really good reframe, and I think it also reminds me of what you had said earlier about how like there's something very human still about buying and like how you react to a certain brand too, and certainly that's not going away. In any case, just I think maybe consumer research like does change in some ways, but I think they're still reacting to people's brand engagement and like how personal or how it actually feels to purchase a product and the whole buying journey. Like even if there are different modalities that they end up using to reach their purchase decision, like they're still interacting with the brand the entire way. So yeah, that definitely makes sense, and it's something that we've heard echoed from other guests where they've mentioned like there's something very human about this part of the buying decision that's not we don't really see that going away.
Yeah, and like let's give an example. Let's give like a really simple example here of like buying a sweater. Just when I was eating lunch today, people were making fun of me because they're like, you always like wearing sweaters, even though I'm not right now. And you know, when I go to buy a sweater, like I really would want to try it on and I want to touch it and feel it. And in that way, my experience of buying a sweater is not really any different than some dude in like the 1820s going out there to buy a sweater, right? Like he had kind of the same experience. You go to the store, I like the way that these people make sweaters, I'm going to buy a sweater and I'm going to try it on. With the internet, I mean, how does this change? Of course, it's like, all right, when I could search on the internet, maybe I go to, I'll pick some brand like, Lululemon or whatever. It's like I can go and look on Lululemon and say, what are the sweaters that they have in stock? All right, cool. I like this one. Next time I'm at the store, I'll try that one on. With a phone, now it's like, all right, instead of this being an activity where when I have a free break, I go to my computer and I'm going to do my sweater research. Now I'm like sitting on the subway and I can check it on my phone. And with an LLM, maybe this starts to become something where we can start to do things like I could take a picture of my friend's sweater and say, all right, can you go find that for me? Or, hey, I'm looking for something that's like made of wool and not a synthetic. What are the trade-offs? Why would I like it? Why would I not like it? What's sort of like the price to health to comfort to warmth trade-off there? Help me think through all of that. And maybe I still go to the store, or maybe I, do my purchasing on when I'm next at my computer, kind of using something from 2 generations of technology ago. And that's the way that all of this compounds, and the way that the experiences and the more dynamic brand to consumer experiences compound over time. And so that's why I'm so optimistic about AI for the brand and consumer relationship, because it's just one more dimension that's going to make a richer experience for everybody.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and I love how you summed that all up. I think, yeah, it'll continue to be an interesting thing to watch and unfold and see how marketing teams react and how the Braze platform helps enable them to do that. So, Kevin, I wanted to thank you so much for coming on the podcast, sharing your thoughts and your vision for customer engagement. Really, really appreciated hearing from you today.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me, Ethan. Really enjoyed the convo.
Thanks so much for watching. If you found this helpful, consider subscribing to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube to get all the latest episodes. And to view our past episodes, visit us at useparagon.com/futureproof.